welcome to another edition of What the Fuck Happenings Here. Over here, yes, inmendham. Anyway, so yes, I just noticed that tomorrow is Labor Day, I should say something. I talk about how life has its downsides, the torture and whatnot. But it does have a lot of this tedious, annoying stuff in it too, and work, having the obligation to show up every day and do something unpleasant is another part of life that's just egregiously a violation of what we'd call fun or a good time. Something you would invent if you were to invent a life for a feeling thing. This wouldn't be, what you'd throw in there. And the argument is, all the animals have to work for their existence, but, in some respects you got to argue that a lot of them are better off than humans in terms of the fact that they have, organized this completely disproportional allocation of this thing called work, and forced some humans to get the worst of it and a lot of others to get the benefit of it. And you can get into the whole efficiency argument also, just about how probably only 3% of the workforce is actually doing useful, productive infrastructure type work, and the rest are doing chicanery and scheming and bullshit, reselling, selling, and just pushing product rather than actually making product. And we all pay for that too. And in terms of the having a shitty job, being a crook, and a liar, a thief for your company, that's not exactly a dignified fate for an organism seeking dignity, seeking to be right with the universe and doing the right thing and all that kind of crap. So anyway, there's a little bit of that in the video. I suppose it fits in a little bit with the idea of thinking isn't fun, and trying to figure things out, putting puzzles together all day would be tedious and difficult. And part of living is doing all of that stuff. And even in the subject of, if people did make the decision to have a kid, there's no doubt about it, if you take it at all seriously, tremendous amount of work, stress, in terms of just the practical fact that you're sort of a slave to this thing's condition, and in more than one way. You have to take it places, do this, do that, all of that servitude, and then on top of that, it's all that thinking for its interest, because it's not smart enough to think in its own interest. And then you have to think smarter than it, because as it grows, it's going to start being a scheming, conniving piece of shit, and you're going to have to be smart enough to prevent that natural default psychology from controlling and dominating your creation. You're going to have to keep working at your Frankenstein to keep it from throwing kids into puddles and shit. It's going to take a lot of training. Okay, you're going to have to spend a lot of time not just worrying about what's in it for you. You're going to have to try to figure out what's in the best interest of your monster as he marches through his little life in his big giant shoes. Anyway, so I don't know if that's a context or not, but whatever. I threw it in. So on to the video, which I was just playing with words, and again, that's all this is about, is little statements about reality. Life sucks. It's if you were to write the pamphlet, it really shouldn't be that difficult to spell it out. And obviously is difficult, and it's difficult for me anyway. I'm not doing it very convincingly or compellingly enough for people to see the point in thinking about these subjects and composing reasoned arguments about why we should be playing this game. They just don't do that. Well, that was interesting. Anyway, yeah, let's just move this over a little bit. All right, so let me just play some of this. It's just not in the cards. It's not. Let's see. Do I have the settings in the correct place so this isn't too loud? Yeah, that might work. We'll see. It's not in the cards. Not in the physics. It's not in the mechanics. That there's anything more to it than programming. Right. So that's the basic argument that we're just robots. Okay. That we really don't own our identity in the sense that we have to sort of just blame our good fortune or bad fortune for what we end up being. It's all just about what bangs into you in your life, what your parents do and what your teachers do and what the system does, and what kind of good luck or bad luck you had in your adventuring in life. So you could have gone to a museum and some sort of bug bit you and your head swelled and all kinds of horrible things happened to you, and now you have this negative association with museums, that kind of thing. And our lives are sort of just made out of those kind of silly reasons for what we feel about stuff. And the argument really is that we can't just be driven by what we feel, how comfortable we are, how much we like baseball or something. We have to be driven by what we understand it to be. And so if somebody asks you, what's better, football or baseball? You're not supposed to answer the question based on what you enjoy watching. You're supposed to answer the question based on which one you think does less damage to humans and elevates their condition more, or in my I would argue that they're both menaces to civilization, and one is worse than the other. Okay. For somebody to understand. So I could be called a pessimist. I'm really not a pessimist. Yeah. So yeah, you live your life. Your disposition. Okay. So I'm a friendly sort, and I hope for the best. I try not to be. I try not to judge all the books as being shitty. I do, try to give them a break and say, okay, maybe there's a good one somewhere, that kind of thing. So I'm always seeking something pleasant and assuming that it's possible that it exists. So I'm not, just negating everything. But clearly, I'm quite aware of the fact that I'm not paying for my existence. Okay, a bunch of sentient organisms are paying the real price, and in a sense, other people are paying the price. And just a fact. I'm not getting the worst of it. I'm not getting my fair share of it, you could argue. So a lot of people don't get their fair share of the crap. They don't get their fair share of disability and, some sort of other conditions that are unpleasant. And so they think life is a lot less expensive than it really is. They just right. And that's the trick. All right, so anyway, I just wrote. Okay, so whatever. I just go by the real point of the video is this idea that we have to use our intelligence to weigh the stories that people tell you. So people are going to tell you stories about aliens, and that the life came from another planet, and they're going to tell you all kinds of flat Earth crap. A bunch of religion and spirituality and mumbo jumbo about quantum this and singularity that. And you have to weigh those stories. You have to figure out which stories are bullshit and which ones are are more consistent with facts and evidence and reasonable statements. So if somebody makes some statement about how life just poofs on every planet, all you got to do is throw a glass of water on it, and all of a sudden a bunch of plants start growing. That's bullshit. Okay, so you have to be able to figure all that out, and unfortunately, most people aren't prepared to be able to judge the stories because they haven't absorbed enough facts, enough science, enough information regarding all the details. And even the scientifically literate are illiterate in the sense that they don't have as personal knowledge how experiments were done and what experiments were done and what details and how it was analyzed and what they drew as a conclusion. They're not in on any of that. So they really don't have a very deep database of facts to judge. They just have stories. And that's the tricky part. Blah, 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 blah. And, the simple argument is, as I've made some simple arguments, right? I'm telling you a story. The story is, all right, so the point is I'm telling a story. And I'm saying, look, the story is just based on a human born on Earth and having minor misadventures, but just observing existence and finding it not much worse than, not much better than slavery and servitude to a bunch of crappy cultural memes and norms, and then horrible natural obligations. And I didn't think that was a fair deal to just throw me into an existence where I didn't get to say something like, no, I don't want to eat other animals. Okay, I don't want to brutalize anything. I don't want to step on anything. I don't want to play by these rules. I want a better set of rules to play by. I don't want my existence to cause something else grief and harm. So unless you give me a better game to play, I don't want to play. And I just think it's a perfectly reasonable way to evaluate your existence, as this isn't good enough. If we can't do better than this, it's best not to do it at all. And it's only a tragedy because you're rooting for a Team Earth. Team. Alright, so I was just saying that, one of the good arguments about this whole idea of existence isn't all that, okay, is the fact that, if I did try to find what the consensus what people really feel or think, I'm not going to be able to find any grief, okay, extended by human beings over the fact that there's no humans on Mars and there's no animals on Mars. It hasn't caused people it's no Holocaust, it's no horror. And that's a giveaway that if you were a fair cop, you'd recognize, if the Earth was just as vacant, it wouldn't mean anything more or less, and it wouldn't be a Holocaust and anything to grieve over, because life is not, it's not some sort of pure good. It's a really dirty good, if it's a good at all. And certainly I would argue that it's pretty easy to understand that the idea of accomplishment is just made out of the fact that you're built in sort of a disgusting way where, you just basically, shit and then clean it up and then feel proud of yourself. You make a mess, you clean up some portion of the mess, and then give yourself a badge, and it's rather ridiculous. Life is just fixing things that should have never been broken. That's that chemistry goes through if it hits, if the right two chemicals mix together. Alright, so that was the next part, but the words aren't matching that. Anyway, that I was starting to talk about, look, there's only one basic theme here, and that's the evolution of matter in the universe, and that, we're just part of these making machine things that the reproduction allowed. So once something could reproduce itself, the evolution thing kicked in, the natural selection kicked in, and it just made machines, and a lot of them are insidious. I mean, horrible weapons, and they really do have acid for blood, and venoms that'll rot your flesh, and all kinds of pretty insidious weapons to do their competing with you. And none of it has any standards. So the praying mantis will eat its victims alive, and it doesn't. There's no natural system that kicks in and makes it all okay and pleasant because it peacefully anesthetized them first. None of that happens in the system that we've been built into, and we just happen to be fortunate that we're kind of very complex and delicate organisms, and so we don't have to live in that harsh or brutal reality, because we're so big, and there's so much invested in our existence in terms of how much how many ants you could build out of one human. It's a lot of ants. Anyway, evolution just doesn't do that. It doesn't give you the key to a door you haven't made yet. So I'm just talking about things like where people think that this intelligence thing is where evolution would go, and it's obviously not where evolution goes. It only did it this one time for this very short period of time, and we haven't even proved it's survivable yet, because you're smart enough to make a bomb, but you're not smart enough not to use it. So, or to make, I mean, we're obviously soiling, we're obviously, polluting our own drinking water, quite literally and as a metaphor, the air, everything else, and, and we've done nothing to recognize that all these unsustainable systems of population increase, the whole immigrant problem is basically not fixed, because all the political engineers, they'll talk all kinds of talk, but the bottom line is they know all of these systems are dependent on growth, and you have to have more. You have to keep, the only way the systems work, the economic system, all these systems, is you have to keep creating more and more of these negative things, all right, to keep this thing stable. If they allow population to decline, then housing prices plunge, the stock market plunges, all these things go down because they're all built on growth. So lots of unsustainable nonsense, very poorly engineered civilization, on top of living in a very poorly engineered natural system. So we're victims to both. And that's another good reason to say, why are you imposing that fate on a thinking, feeling organism to exist in very dirty systems? Shit. Alright, so take a break, and well, that's not the perfect moment. Yeah, try again. Yeah, who are belligerently delusional. So, all right. So I was just getting to the point that yes, all of this, it is, the future's gigantic. All of these people are dependent on you providing the foundation for their existence. You're building the foundation of the Empire State Building, and It's just a fact. And so you might just say, well, I'm just living my life. Well, that future is going to have to live on the decisions you made, the votes you've cast, the people you supported, all that crap. And they're going to have to live with your decision for a very long time, because it's hard to undo what you've built upon. Just as we're proving, in the sense that it's hard to get rid of the mistakes made in the past, because tradition and attachments and all that kind of stuff. And so obviously, the civilization of humanity should no longer be blighted by fairy tales, okay, those silly old contrived religions. And yet that's a huge liability, that we still have to, we're still suffering from that disease that they invented. And it's very hard to finally wipe it out, like smallpox or something. And that's so, and we're in the same position. For the people in the future are going to curse us because we didn't do anything to fix what was obviously broken. Pretty much. Tool. One of the first tools of intelligent organisms. So feeling is, comes first, and it's very old. And so the argument here is leaning towards the next statement, which is, as I've written, it's not a single player game. And that's a really important piece of context for your existence. Is it's not about you, it's about us. Okay, it's about if you dump all the misery and suffering on others, that's like just that's like saying, somehow broken legs, it's better if they have them than I have them. It's just not a rational thing to do or to think. And it all adds up to the same thing. And so if you're not willing to say, I would want somebody to impose these hard lives that are lived on me, I'd want to live them, I'd accept living them, then you really have no point imposing them. And I just don't think anybody honest could say they would live those lives. People, will tell you they're done living their life if just something simple happens. If they're a painter and they get, palsy or something, say life isn't worth living. So it doesn't take much to get a lot of people to say their life isn't worth living. So let's not pretend that, you're perfectly willing to go through life blind or something else. Because you've lived better, you know better. You'll take my place because there's billions of people. There's got to be a doppelganger somewhere. So people investing in the future and all this stuff, about a future of who? It's, your story's going to end. And do you really think the other stories being told are worth 58 cents? So again, it's the fact that people don't see the tragedy of themselves not living on Mars. So they must really understand that, yes, no, it's about me. And once I'm not on the planet, well, the planet's not nearly as interesting. And that's a piece of psychology. You have to recognize it's inside. And, you really are bullshitting when you say the very idea of a me is important. When, no, it's not the idea of a me being on Earth. It's really about you being on Earth. And as soon as you're not on it, I don't think you're all that invested, frankly. I don't think you'd vote the same way if you weren't living on Earth. If you were somewhere else, okay, and you were just making a judgment about whether Earth needs little biological organisms eating each other, I think you'd recognize that, no, I don't see how that does me any good. I don't see how I win because Earth is covered in a bunch of blood and torn to pieces of, of living things. Yeah, I don't think so. Choosing, weighing stories, definitions, statements about reality. Right, so that's all we're here to do, okay? And I'm saying you're putting your fingers on the scales. You're cheating the argument. Because if you really look at it, biological robots basically built to be kind of insidious and nasty. Even the prey animals, they're competing with each other. They're playing all kinds of alpha beta games and doing all kinds of pretty nasty shit. And it's all just nasty. And the universe doesn't need these robots. The robots don't serve any purpose. They're just, beating the shit out of each other. It's a bad TV show that nobody's watching. So let's cancel it. The truth. You have to be, painting on the telescope, what you want to see. Yeah, it just isn't in the facts, okay, to be able to take this true story of our evolution, our construction, and paint all this spirituality crap or purpose crap or, function crap or any of that on it. It's just a DNA molecule replicating, and it's, doing it at a huge, gigantic waste price. The waste is just monstrous. We ought to be able to just say as a thing, as a statement, that's not ideal. Okay, so if we're going to bother being here, so I mean, it sort of is about this ideal thing, though. It is like this idea that you'd want to advance your condition. If I could relive my life, I'll take the waste out of it. I'll take the mistakes I made out, the errors, the damage, the that kind of stuff. And we just keep wanting to improve things by taking all of these liabilities and costs and expenses out of it. I mean, if even if you're a meat eater, you could understand, well, I wish there was animals that didn't have any brains but had meat. That would be your argument. I wish we could make like a giant paramecium or something and eat parameciums. You'd say that would be better because then I don't have to feel guilty. So there's all kinds of room for improvement. And the fact that there is so much room for improvement is just the argument that this is a lemon, and you're just forcing it because you've already bought it. You're just pretending it's not the piece of shit that it is. Of checkers, and so the checkers can be in arrangements that can. So this is just about the physics part of it. That, it's all a very simple process. There's nothing, we are just acting out, okay, the evolution of a bunch of electrons and protons banging into each other, and they all have trajectories and are all on their way doing something. And this just happens to be the pattern they formed. They formed a pattern of a fish, and the fish evolves into the pattern of a human being. And then the human beings write words and throw them at each other, and it just couldn't have happened any other way. And this is the pattern it's stuck in and it's stuck with. But clearly what we're doing as we're composing this inevitable, through this inevitable process, there'll be plenty of conversation about that very fact, that all I can do is read the script, and the thing that we can see as we're reading our script is when I'm being an asshole, or when somebody else is being an asshole. And so we can talk about it. And that's part of the inevitable process of realizing you're assholes, or realizing, yeah, I am putting my fingers on the scale. Yeah, I am painting bullshit pictures on the telescope. It's all stuff we can know we're doing, and that will be part of the evolutionary process, part of the process that weighs the memes and changes the themes. You change what happens and how people function through that process. But you, okay, yeah, the you part, you're just one swirl in a bunch of swirls, and you're not going to escape the fact that in fact, you didn't have a damn thing to do with it. Okay, the universe made you, and that's just a fact. The ideas weren't really yours. They had to be constructed out of something. All of the ingredients are, you can't do anything but allow them to mix. You know, you're just a vessel for them to mix. You don't mix. But they can't, figure out, how to use a knife and fork. Yeah, so just, that was a tiny little bit about an idiot savant. And, because I'll say something like, you have to practice the piano to play the piano. And, oh yes, okay, there's a few exceptions where brains are configured where they're obsessed with just sounds, and so they just reproduce sounds. No matter what you give them, they'll figure out the scale, and they'll figure out what buttons to press to make songs. But that's, again, just mechanics. And you clearly see the price paid for a brain that does that well is that it can't do anything else at all, let alone anything else well. Than they can. Our radar is better. Our, sonar, whatever you want to. So there's the distinction between us and the animals is, it has nothing to do with, we're both boats. We're both feeling sentient beings. We're really this, in essence the same thing. And all you're saying is because, you have a loudspeaker and a flashlight and, some better tools, that somehow you have to be called a ship, and somehow you're just not something floating in the water. So no, it's not enough of a difference to mean anything, because the only part of this existence that means anything or has value is the capacity to feel, to have sensations, to feel relief and to feel grief. And those are that's all we're playing for. And the animals have just as much money in the pot as we do. And if you don't want to recognize that, again, I'm saying you're smearing shit on the view screen, because that's really easy to see. To get what they want. How do I undo her bra? All right. So I'm just talking about, we gain intelligence. And the fact is you can use intelligence as a scheming tool for yourself, or you can use intelligence to save the world. And you can use your capacity to compute numbers and to compute ideas, to compute conclusions. Well, that's what your brain does. It does it fairly well if you allow it to do it fairly well. If you don't allow your feelings and your personal interest to infect your statements and judgments, brains work pretty good. They're pretty good logic devices. They're pretty good at mixing facts and drawing correct conclusions. And that's all we can do here. And again, the problem is though too many people are just interested in information that gives them power personally, and not so interested in information that might make them save the future. It's not a me game. So we all feel like it's a me game. I mean, I'm very me-ish, I have to say. I mean, I definitely feel me-ish. But I know that even people I hate, even things... this was one of these little, again, these things that pop into your head. And, I had this point where, you want something bad to happen to the people you hate. And I thought about it, and I said, yeah, but it's like, even if I give Adolf Hitler a headache, it's still a headache in the universe. So from the universe's qualitative standard, it doesn't matter that he's a shithead. The headache's not going to elevate the human condition. It's just going to make another victim, another person suffering. And there's no win in it. So, unless the headache is going to make him into a friendly, nice, happy person that won't hurt anybody, unless it's going to change him into something that will cause less harm, it's useless. I mean, the only way punishment or retribution or karma has any value is if it, reclamates something else, prevents a future harm. There's no point in harming anything if it's not going to eliminate more harm than the harm is in itself. So if I can do one harm today and get 3 harm preventions tomorrow, well, it's a good deal. But it's a bad deal if I make a harm that doesn't produce any unharm. That there's no way to be too distracted by what do I want. It's just our dilemma, though. So it's a real thing. We can be smart enough to know that we're pretty corrupt and pretty, shitty and lazy and all these things, and we can try to just say that there has to be a balance in my life where I'm true to the facts as best as I can and the truth. And yeah, I don't have to be a complete slave to the future, but I owe them consideration. I owe that future consideration. Just as if I owned a timeshare, I owe the next people who are going to be living in the timeshare the consideration of, flushing the toilet and whatnot. So many ways you can turn it inside your head, and you have to imagine. So just talking about how thinking isn't much fun, compared to feeling. Not very interesting. It's not much of an experience. And sometimes it's a very irritating experience if you have to think about things, figure out things that have lots of moving parts, and try to figure, and it's tedious. Okay, don't know much how else to describe it except tedious. When you know it's sort of there is a connection, but you just can't visualize enough of the parts. You can't put enough together to roll the film. And so it's clunky, it's kind of a Flintstone, rock car. Just doesn't work very well. And I would just argue that those arguments haven't really been made. I would assume those are the arguments defending this project, the game, as anything other than a complete disaster. Aren't persuaded, by all the scientific evidence demonstrating the truth of evolution. Yeah, so it's, I mean, you have to really be belligerent to the truth to evade acceptance of the evidence as conclusive. But this is what happens, right? The OJ trial. People will not take their responsibility seriously and decide that they're just going to cheat the truth. And that's the part that's very tragic. Alright, but that's probably enough. Probably the end. And, that's a glaring, frightening reality. Yeah, that people are really not very honest. Okay. Anyway, alright, so probably enough of a video and such. So, yeah, I'm, just working on consolidating all of this. I mean, you just can't do it with simple metaphors aren't good enough. Simple little things aren't good enough. Somehow you have to put, there has to have more bite in it. So, things that I would have thought would have been enough aren't enough. And so got to keep working at it. So anyway, till the next time and such and so forth. I mean, even just the tightrope analogy or something. I mean, why would you subject a dog to it? Why would you subject anything to this idea that you're just going to keep throwing them on the tightrope until one of them figures out how to get to the other side without falling on the knives? I mean, the risk and the imposition is so obvious. Why would you be an obnoxious imposer of risk and harm? Anyway, enough. So, till the next time, and such, and so forth, and whatnot. Happy holiday. Yeah.